Welcome back to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. Today we're continuing on our mini-series on Drow in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm Ehlwyn, lurking through the Underdark with both Casey and Megan while we reveal more truths about Drow.
With everything changing as D&D 5th edition gets the 2024 updates, it's important that we don't lose any lore or details that previous editions had to offer. However, even as we pour over everything Drow in the 5th edition, it's also important to understand the problematic nature of some of Drow history. So make sure you listen to episode 0 of this series and keep it all in mind.
In this episode, this panel of Dungeon Masters is going to look at how the Drow were first introduced to 5th edition and the vibes the designers wanted new players to experience. The details provided about a Drow City and the stat blocks for both the basic Drow and its mount.
Alrighty, so we'll dive right in with a pretty good quote that comes from, I believe this is in the Monsters Manual. Such depravity, such terrifying cruelty, they are the vile poison that pegs all elven kind. So that was from Nellar Autumnwell, who is a elf cleric of Corleon. So I guess that kind of just a bit sets the tone. So Out of the Abyss introduces Drow right away in Chapter 1. Interwoven with the description of the Underdark, its lack of sunlight and endless labyrinths of tunnels and passages is the introduction of the Dark Elves. Known for their pillaging of other settlements within the Underdark, as well as the surface world, the Drow kidnap and shackle prisoners to be used for or sold into slavery or used for entertainment. They are hated and filled by all fellow darkness dwellers. Their prisoners are used for menial tasks, hauling water barrels, operating the lift, cleaning chamber pots, laundry dishes, but they're also given pointless and often cruel tasks as well. Things like moving or stacking rocks, coiling rope, organizing supplies, but it's never to the satisfaction of the Drow, and they're always forced to repeat the task over and over again, much to the Dark Elves' entertainment. The Drow are characterized by their arrogance, cruelty, and brutality, seeing their slaves as mere property and treating them with disdain. Even the lowest of the Drow recognize the perceived inferiority of other beings, in interacting with the captives as if they were nobility themselves. In contrast, they exhibit a sycophantic attitude towards their superiors, often with passive-aggressive undertones. Males defer to females, low-ranking warriors bow to the elite, and all ultimately yield to the priestess Ilvara, commander of Vilkenfell. This is the fate that our intrepid adventurers find themselves wrapped up in, captive and restrained in Drow slave pens in the outpost of Vilkenfell at the start of this particular adventure. Stripped of everything but their underclothes, they're at the mercy of the Dark Elves. The only other companions that they have are the other captives, many of whom aren't what they seem. It's important to understand that this is the standard kind of experience that Wizards of the Coast wants the players to have when encountering Drow for the first time in D&D. This sets the tone for everything else to come and shows us the intentions behind design decisions. So let's roll some dice.
Dice time!
Okay.
17.
I have a 4.
Nat 1.
Amazing.
I love that for both of you. Great start. Great start.
Dice immediately.
Alrighty. So we're going to start off. So think about the players at one of your D&D tables. Does this first encounter sound like a good hook to draw in those players?
I think this is a hard one, because especially if you wanted to use the rules as written and lore as written in terms of what Wizards of the Coast has provided, it does make sense that this is your first encounter with them, especially if the group and players that are at your table, like I think of our tables right now, none of us are from the Underdark, none of us are from the Feywild, none of us, like, there's a few from the Feywild, but like from the Feywild, not from the, like, any of the other, like, darkness versions. I'm just saying this with air quotes. And so the only way that you would come across Drow is if you came across them when they were in the middle of a raid, if they were coming up to the surface for something, or if your group was particularly looking for something that was going to be occurring within the Underdark and you were going down there knowing you were going to be interacting with things that you've never interacted with before, right? So it makes sense that this would be your first encounter, but it doesn't have to be as brutal in the way that they describe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you could come across a town where it has happened before. So your group is now on the hook to try and figure out what's going on. So you follow the trails, you find yourself in the Underdark, right? You don't have to describe the whole process of being captors and captured yourselves, but you could be the heroic group that is going towards solving the problem. Does that make sense? Like, you know, so, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I was kind of thinking along the same, because I mean, Drow are known for also kind of venturing to the surface and taking captives and things like that. So, kind of along the same tone, it's possible that you come across a town where people are going missing. And that's essentially, it ends up all leading down into the Underdark, and that's how you end up getting down there. So, you're not necessarily starting um, like Out of Abyss wants you to, where you are chained and shackled in, in a slave pen, and you're trying to, talk your way out of it type thing. Because like it says in Out of the Abyss that you have no spell components, you have no, magical focuses, you have none of your weaponry, you are stripped down
Yeah.
to nothing. And that's quite difficult for party when you're at level 1.
Yeah. And we've done prison dynamics before
Yeah.
for other reasons, right? Like one of your rogues goes off and does something fucked up, and so your group gets arrested for nonsense, and so you end up in a jail cell without any of your shit. Casey and I, we've experienced a lot of things in Adam's campaigns where they have magical barriers, so our magic characters are absolutely useless. You know what I mean? So it does like bode for a lot of creativity that is required on your group's part to have a scenario like this occur, right?
Totally.
So yeah.
For it to be like the very first thing, I think is quite difficult. But also really allows your players to flex their kind of creativity and their improvisation and
Work on
charisma.
their role playing, develop your character as a character as
develop,
opposed to a sword holder, you know?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for that. What about you, Casey?
Yeah, I am quite certain I have started a campaign in a prison cell with nothing. However, it wasn't the slave aspect, and of course, it wasn't in a Drow City, and so that in itself, your first encounter is like each one of your party members that you are about to like meet are all in individual cells or being are captured and are being restrained. So I enjoy that piece just for the kind of like the instant challenge. I didn't look at all actually in the book, but like it makes me think too that you could actually make this more challenging and start at a higher level if you wanted to use this sort of style. Because what I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, wait, does this start at level 1? And then Ehlwyn, you said it started at level 1, because you could make it even more challenging and let them play for a few sessions without any of their stuff and see how they
Adam.
Could you tell, Megan?
looking right at you, Adam, through the screen.
Like there is a note that it does say, like, if you want it to be a little bit more challenging, you can start them at a level 3. But it is designed for kind of first couple of chapters is designed for level 1, 2, and 3. So you could probably start them in and around a level 3, for a little bit of added difficulty or complexity to it. But
I think the fact that it starts at level 1 makes more sense because challenges or challenge ratings that are at that level for your group, in terms of like if I'm going to fight something and fisticuffs it, that's easier at level 1 than it would be at level 3, right? So, or fisticuffs it or try and get through with your charisma, right? So there's more options for your team to be a little bit more creative without being simply punishing by using this as the first scenario that they're in. But I do think that with more skilled players, scaling it up would be an interesting thing to do because sometimes that creativity and their ability to be ad hoc is a little bit more senior, I guess.
Yeah. So we did kind of already touch on this, but what's another introduction that you would use to let new players get a feeling for Drow in an initial meeting?
I would have so here's the thing, because I do believe that Drow visit the surface for more reasons than just taking and going back down under, because there's a lot of things around. They're trying to build up their society in such a way that they are taking the best of the best to create the best of the best. So they would, in my mind, also have smaller factions and societies that do live on the surface, where their job is to find the best of the best, find the heroes, find the best fighter, find the best builder, so on and so forth, right? And so I think a good first meeting would be that someone in your group is like a super good herbalist, shall we say, and knows how to grow things in any level of sunlight, darkness, shade herbs, so on and so forth. And they're hunting you because they want you in their city to help them develop their herbalism or their gardens or their ability to grow life underground. And this would be great for your cleric in your group. This would be great for even if you have an elf like rogue in your group that has like a background in poisons and things like that, right? That can be utilized in the backstory to find a reason as to why the drow would be interested in you, right? So, and I feel like that wouldn't happen at level 1. That would be like level 3 to level 6 when your characters are more established as heroes in an area, right? So your group does their first big good for the community, and then you become known, your names are known, and now you're being sought after by a group of drow that are like, we want you to help grow our city. So again, taking away that necessity of it being aggressive and like an awful feeling to be taken captive by them, but more of a, we do want you to come and help our city. And they'll be forceful about it, don't get me wrong, because they want the best of the best. But I think it's a more graceful introduction than just, we're going to take you and all your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we did kind of touch on it earlier in saying that, you know, if people were going missing in a village or something like that, then you were kind of adventuring down to try and find them. And that's when you kind of come across, you know, kind of the captive pens and things like that. And that's kind of your first introduction. I think, you know, you could also, you know, introduce it in a way that, like, if, you know, say you're just wanting to kind of sprinkle drow in, you're not having like a drow heavy campaign, you're not doing the Out of the Abyss campaign and things like that. And, you know, your players just find themselves for whatever reason down in, you know, the Underdark and things like that. They're gonna be coming across these outposts. Um, you know, it's not just Velkenvelv that's out there. They've got a bunch of different outposts throughout the Underdark and things like that. So I think it's almost inevitable that if you have a party that's going down to the Underdark for whatever reason, they're going to be encountering drow and they're going to be encountering these outposts and they're going to be encountering these captives. And then it's just going to be a matter of what stance does your party take on it?
Yep, that's
Do
true.
they try and help? Do they try and help the captives, or do they try and say, okay, well, we're down here for a reason. We might not want to piss off the drow.
Let's let them take us with them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be kind of like a little bit of like a moral decision for the group.
Yep.
And I have a feeling that there'll be ones like, you know, like your rogues and your barbarians that are gonna be like, yeah, let's go, like that's totally fine, like we could leave them and, you know, let's just keep going on. And or you're gonna have your paladins and your clerics that are like, we need to help these people.
Yeah. And it's good to it would be a moral standing, right? And I remember I always like compare it to like I remember, Casey will remember this, when we had the lizard folk running around with us at one point in time, we were using them to help us with being able to navigate and travel in a desert. But then we realized that they eat their dead. And so we had a religious thing, like battle going on in terms of like, well, no, we bury our dead. And then others are like, well, no, we burn our dead. So it became like a morality thing of how do we handle our dead, like as a thing. So I can imagine, yes, how do we handle this situation in terms of we're seeing these people being taken captive. Are they being taken captive? You wouldn't know too. Are they being taken captive because they were thieves and were stealing things? And is there a reason for this, right? It depends on what side your group is going to take without all the information, right? So what about you, Casey?
You could kind of take a slight step back from like the horror of the slave piece of drow, and maybe like I imagine, say, like you were talking about being, if you or your party potentially is captured on the surface and then being brought down, and if they're being brought down into one of the prominent cities in the Underdark, I would like to take that opportunity as the DM to really describe what you're seeing, and which would give you an idea of like how they're living. So it's like you can see estate homes and like mansions, and then as you get closer down you start seeing like slums, and then you start seeing as you're walking through the being like, you know, corralled to go down to the prisons or the pits. You're seeing then, oh, you're observing that there looks like there's people working like not under their free will, like there is slavery going on, and not really put it right in your face, but just kind of give you a hint based on what the players are observing as you just walk through a Drow city.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they may end up in this scenario down in the prisons or captive, but it would just give a bigger picture than just this is Drow and they are making us slaves, and that's like step one. It's trying to give a little bit more insight into more of what Drow are.
Yep. Very much so.
Well, I think that that's a really good segue into our next portion, which is talking about Drow cities. So, Casey, take it away.
Yeah, and this may be why I was inspired to be like, there's so much more.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And truly, the book has a lot of details about what specific cities look like, and there's a lot of inspiration you can pull and pick and choose for setting up your own city that works for you. One of the key cities in the Underdark is the City of Spiders, which is called Menzoberranzan. Built within a great cavern with 1,000-foot ceilings, the stalagmites and stalactites were large enough to carve homes and strongholds from. The principal law here is, not surprisingly, the way of Lolth. If you follow any other entity, you will be slain or sacrificed to Lolth. Menzoberranzan is shielded from teleportation due to a mark in their history where Demogorgon appeared and rampaged, destroying large swaths of the city. And this is one thing that anyone who ever has been in the Underdark, and is like, especially if you're a Drow, you would know this history about this city and what happened. But generally, a Drow city is always heavily protected and fortified. And there's going to be a Drow patrol and or spiders. Spider webbing is not only used for protection by alarms, but also used to create bridges between areas. Key cities are connected by twisted passageways and many secret passageways as well. And you think with all of the webbing, like how do they light and be able to bring some sort of light focus to the cities? But it's noted that they use eldritch fires all around the cities. Slaves are in abundance and they have no rights in any city. There are residential areas and estate areas based on the hierarchy, and a noble estate is likely to have its own militia. If we look at commerce, this is interesting. The Menzoberranzan in particular, their commerce is in well-trained slaves, fungi, mold, exotic creatures for food, poisons, potions, elixirs, jewelry, perfume, and of course, silk. So I think this is one of the more unique things to focus on as a DM, especially if your party happens to have downtime while they're in a Drow city, or needs to acquire specific items from a Drow city, because they aren't interested in gold. They are interested in trading these specific things, and that's what's of interest to them. So it might take some prep work, or it might be a surprise once you get to one. Menzoberranzan also has a ruling council of matron mothers of the 8 most powerful Drow noble houses in the city. It also includes the Church of Lolth And interestingly, a group of Drow spies, mercenaries, and assassins called the Bregan Deirthe. And so this as well, I think you could tailor to like if you were creating a smaller city, you could have a smaller council, but it seems like a council and Lolth are going to be a common theme. There's also an academy with 3 branches where non-Drow are forbidden entry. In this academy, there are pyramid-shaped edifices where Drow warriors are trained, a cathedral where Drow priestesses go to worship, and a tower where Drow mages master the magical arts. The book has several pages describing the city in even more detail. And so, yeah, I just think there's plenty of inspiration to adapt to any kind of Drow city you might need in your campaign. And I think these different pieces I highlighted are reasonable to consider when building your own Drow city, because they will be consistent since Lolth is like the ruler. That's just full stop. That's going to be there.
Alrighty.
Stupid
Let's
spiders.
roll.
Mhm.
All right.
Spiders everywhere. Let's roll some dice.
Rolling. 15.
10.
6.
Alrighty,
Getting better,
Megan.
Casey. Getting better.
It is, I guess.
There's only up from here. Alrighty. So what's one unique detail, or what's one unique homebrew detail that you'd add to a Drow city to embrace the fact that it's thriving in the Underdark?
Okay, I want to lean into the silk thing because obviously the finest of silks come from the Underdark in terms of the Drow, right? So I think it was one of our most recent episodes where we talked about how we were going to Bridgerton the shit out of the Drow. Of course, there is one place where everyone goes to get their silks and their fabrics and everything that makes a household rich and expensive. So the higher you are, modiste, basically. And that's to me what would breed that it is thriving, right? Because like in societal norms, only the richest and finest houses would be able to shop there, right? And there would be a societal thing of anyone of this rank can shop at this store, right? So if you were wearing those finest silks to any of the events or the courts, or your courtiers are wearing this, or your leading mothers of your homes are wearing these silks, it is a representation of your status. And I feel like they would also trade with groups on the surface in terms of like trading fine silks for other fine jewelry, diamonds, things to like dress up their outfits. And then that would be a good trade system that they have. So even on the surface, people will notice if you're wearing Lolth silk. And you would almost be like a representation of the fact that you have shopped with or are affiliated with the Drow in some way, shape, or form if you are wearing this finest silk, because it's extremely hard to get and probably somewhat illegal on the surface, is what I'm imagining in my brain. So it is a statement if you are wearing Lolth silk up on the surface. So
no, I can totally see that, and that's actually, love that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I love that. Like the fact that it like the elitism of it very much plays into Drow characteristics and things like that. But I just love the fact that it would be like it's almost like taboo on the surface to wear that. I mean, as far as like homebrew details and things like that, when it comes to like cities and things like that, like I always love bringing in like just kind of like a little bit more modern aspects and things like that. So like as you were like describing, like they've like the stalactites and things like that, like they've carved their homes and things like that into it. I don't know why, like I'm just thinking of like really cool ways that they're using the eldritch fire as far as like not just like really cool like sconces and things like that, but like backlit panes of like stained glass and things like that that are like just dripping with opulence and just almost having technologic technological kind of aspects to it, so kind of homebrewing it in that way that like it's a little bit weird, like I don't know why, like I'm thinking like I'm thinking like Times Square in New York with like all of the billboards and things like that, but like how do you translate that into kind of like a Drow City type thing? Like they're gonna be fleshy and they're gonna be, kind of that sort of thing. So it's like they've got these like really intricate kind of stained glasses of their houses, crests, and things like that, and advertisements, and like on buildings and on businesses and things like that. These businesses are owned by these drow, and so they're specifically designed in like the house colors and things like that. And so like that's kind of how you kind of show who owns who and like who are the most powerful houses and things like that as well. I don't know. That was what came into my brain.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like I also thought about the Hunger Games where like there's the poorest of the poor, but then they still bring in and have these like giant big screens that they just like project, and so all these like no matter how rich or poor you are, you like it's like vroom, and then they give the information on what's going on.
It's all flashy.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, Casey.
Yeah, I was kind of in the line of fashion as well, in the armies and the like the patrols, and then the militia. Like it mentions that probably each noble estate will have its own militia. And so like for example, the council in Menzo Baranzan is of 8 most powerful Drow noble houses. So I imagine the armor that militia has for each of those houses has similar aspects to it, but also it's like a competition of who can outdo who. So like depending on what the matron prefers, I imagine like the headpieces just get more and more ridiculous the further and the more wealthy you get.
Like Spartan brush top and all of
Yeah, and then like their weapons, like if they have spears or like bows and whatever they're using, it just gets more and more expensive and intricate. And so that then becomes an indicator, kind of like the silks. Like it's like when you see the armor and you see there might be just a crest etched into like the chest plate or something, and that is like a recognizable piece, so that you know which house they're coming from. Even if you see them marching through the city, you instantly know which house they're associated with, and that they're not just like the city guards or whatever. So I think you could really focus on the who has the wealth, and they will be happy to display that wealth wherever they're going. So like going back to, is it thriving? Well, if you see an army of 100 drow that are in the most pristine armor and are shining and basically becoming their own eldritch fire as they walk down the street, you're going to know, okay, they're well off.
It's a presentation, like it's a whole thing.
it's pomp and circumstance.
Yeah,
totally.
Love it.
Yeah. What is one unique homebrew detail that you'd add to a Drow City to highlight another aspect of daily Drow life?
I love the whole gardening aspect in my mind, especially in an underground city, because you're going to find so many different kinds of vegetables, fungus, or what have you that they're cultivating, and everyone has to, because it's not like there's farmland that they get food from. So it's almost like every household has its own garden of some sort, right? Whether someone does florals and herbs and another one has, well, we're the household of fungus and XYZ. So the daily life would be you wake up in the morning and you go and you tend to your gardens, harvest what you can, and then go on with your daily business, right? But I think that that's a fun visual to add as a DM when folks are wandering through this city, and like some of the more suburban areas would be that there's gardens everywhere. But they have plants that your group probably from the surface have never seen. And so this would be a huge thing for your cleric to be like, what are you gardening and how are you growing this?
Or like or your druid or something like that. They're like, this is not natural. What are you doing?
Correct, right? Like, how are you getting this to grow the way that you're getting it to grow? And it's like,
Yeah.
and then and the warlocks will be like, okay, well, we use this spell to synthesize daylight, or sometimes we
Yeah.
use this to up the humidity in the area so that we can continue to grow this
Or it's
certain
the
type of
heat.
fungus, or like they have a full
Yeah.
science, because especially if they're into tinctures and poisons, and
Yeah.
like they have to be very careful with what they grow and what grows beside it. So it would be a huge educational thing. I feel like there would almost be a school
Yeah.
in terms of
An
like herbalism.
herbology, yeah, an
Yeah.
herbology school, or like an arborist school, yeah, things like that. Horticulture.
Correct.
Horticulture is the word I was
Horticulture
looking
is the
for.
word. Yeah, I'm like also trying to. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but there it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like that would be a really cool thing to add into the society in terms of it just exists there and it's part of the day to day in the gardening, but also an opportunity for players who visit the city to be able to do research and spend some time here and learn something from them, right? So
Yeah. I was just thinking about what we were talking about in episode 2, how we were Bridgertizing things, and we had talked about houses having balls. And like they've essentially got their court and they're having
events, yeah.
their events and things like that. And like that's just kind of something that I would definitely want to add into, drow cities and things like that. And even, like not just specifically in this one in Mesobarazan, um, but like there's other cities within, Underdark and things like that. And so it's almost like competing cities of like who can hold like the best ball and things like that. So it's, for kind of like their own specific either like holidays or just actual like celebrations, or say like one house has overtaken another house as far as like status is concerned. They're going to hold the biggest, shiniest, most fantastic ball to absolutely rub everybody else's noses in it.
Love it. We
Mhm.
love a ball.
We
We love
do.
a good ball.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was totally like inspired by maybe it's because they used the word academy, but like the academy that has 3 branches. It's basically like, are you going to become a soldier or a like person of worship, which there's only one person you get to worship, but nonetheless, or you get to become like a wizard. And so I feel like this could be its own story where when you reach a certain age, you then are sorted into one of these 3 things based on what you are. And an powerful entity determines whether you are going to be one of the 3, and you go through that whole motion, and it's just yeah. Sound
Yeah.
familiar?
At first, my brain went Pokemon, choosing between Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur, and then my brain was like, "Oh, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, or Gryffindor."
Yeah. Yeah, like so many different fantasy things that I love. Just I'm like, oh boy, we could just forget all the rest. Just this could be.
Just this.
Yeah, Drow could
At the
be
right,
customized to any of them, to be honest with you. Like,
yeah,
it's very interesting.
at the ripe young age of 10 or 11, which would be what, like 40 or 50 in Drow years, I
In
guess.
elf years, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Well, then, without further ado, I'm going to take us through the actual Drow stat block. So let's do it. So this is going to be basically what we're given in the Monster Manual of 5th edition. It is simple enough, but it's going to be the foundation of all the stat blocks we talk about moving forward. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and go through some of the things with a little bit more detail than we normally do with the stat breakdown. A reminder that because it is a monster stat block, this is a breakdown of a regular combatant. So they're technically going to be a little bit more on the stronger side than a regular. But I think narratively, as DMs, we don't have to have all of the everyday drows be this way. You can use NPC stat blocks and other things like that to kind of augment them, which I know something we'll talk about in the future. But that being said, this is kind of where we're sitting. So they are a medium humanoid neutral evil elf thing. Their AC is 15 because they tend to wear chain-like shirts for armor. It doesn't say chainmail, it just says chain shirt. And they have basically 13 hit points and a speed of 30. So far, nothing overly exciting. That is kind of like your basic humanoid combatant that is wearing a piece of armor, right? Their strength is 0, their dex is +2, their con is 0, their intelligence is 0, their wisdom is 0, and their charisma is +1. I think this plays well into them being depicted as more graceful and proud of their and proud of their society. Being that dex is what it is being that their dex is what it is, and that charisma is one of their highest scores. Again, we're dealing with a society that takes societal norms and charisma and status into play. It makes sense to me that charisma is their higher stat. And dex as well. The fact that they live underground, there's some dexterous things that are required that just comes along with that, right? They are skilled in perception and stealth, again, which checks out for their roguish behaviors. They have dark vision of 120 feet, makes sense, and they have a passive perception of 12. In terms of languages, they speak Elvish and Undercommon, which I think is actually quite interesting, the fact that they speak Elvish still. It's one of those things where I feel like Lolth would have just been like, fuck that, we just speak Undercommon, but it is still ingrained within them that they are part of Fey and Elvish societals, that they keep their Elvish language. This makes them a CR of 1/4. For abilities, they have Fey ancestry, so speaking of the fact that they are connected with the Fey and elves as a whole. Basically, this is they have advantage on being charmed. Yes, so if they're trying to be charmed, they have advantage on not being charmed. I'm trying to figure out how that makes sense in my brain. I'm like, shouldn't they have... someone has disadvantage because they have advantage on charming them.
Yes.
Anyways, and magic can't put them to sleep. This is something I always forget as a player if I'm playing an elf character, that you can't put me to sleep by magical means. And Adam has done it so many times to my character, and I totally forgot that is a thing that he cannot do. And I think him and I actually had a conversation. Anyways, it's a whole thing. And just remember, if you are an elf and you have Fey ancestry, you cannot be put to sleep.
I will try to help you in the future, Megan. I'll be like, wait, Megan, remember.
Megan, you're fine. They are innate spellcasters. They use charisma as their saving throw, and they know dancing lights is their cantrip. I think that's kind of cute because they live underground. Sometimes like, could use a little bit of light down here. You know what I mean? And then they have once per day, they can do darkness and fairy fire, which I feel fits as well, right? And as we've spoken about before, they have sunlight sensitivity. So for a reminder, this is just disadvantage on attack rolls, as well as wisdom checks when it comes to perception when in the sunlight. For actions, they have a short sword. That's a +4 to hit, for 1d6 to piercing damage. So not too scary. Again, just a basic combatant. And they have a hand crossbow. That's a +4 to hit. It's a ranged attack, of course, with 1d6 +2 damage. But someone has to succeed on a DC 13 con save or be poisoned. So this kind of checks out to what Casey was speaking about in their cities, is that poisons, tinctures, these things exist in their society. So it makes sense that their weapons might be tipped, right? The fun part, though, is that if someone fails by more than 5 on their save, they're knocked unconscious by this poison. However, being damaged or shaken will wake them up. In terms of, it's similar to like you just have fallen asleep, right? So, but yeah, that is the stat block for Drow.
Alrighty, let's roll some dice.
9.
I got a 15.
Nice.
I'm back on track at 12.
Amazing. Alrighty. So is there anything that is missing from this stat block that might represent a drow a little better? Looking at the stat block, I'm actually surprised that the charisma's low. Like +1 is a little bit lower than I would have thought that it might have been, especially because that is you know, their spell casting, like their innate spell casting, they use charisma for it.
Yeah. I feel like they don't have a dump stat though.
Yeah,
like they're zeros across the board except for charisma and dex. So
they don't have a dump stat. Yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like for just kind of like an average drow, I would almost like swap those. Like have just a dex of 1 and a charisma of 2. That would just personally be me. Anything else that's kind of missing? I also kind of feel like they speak Elvish and Undercommon, but because they do go to the surface, I also feel like they would speak Common, or at least have like a general sense of common, or even maybe, I don't know, like thieves can't or something like that, because
I was gonna say thieves can't is something that they should
yeah,
probably have.
yeah,
That would be really neat. Like again,
yeah,
they're not all rogues, but because of the way their
no,
society works in secrecy and all this kind of stuff, it makes sense that
exactly.
they would have thieves can't.
And I feel like they would take advantage of, thieves guilds, kind of tunnels and passageways and things like that throughout cities, like, and use that as their advantage, and that's kind of how they traverse. So they've kind of taught themselves, thieves can't, to be able to navigate their way through kind of that, kind of under like the sewers of, kind of the cities and things like that. um so those would kind of be the only two things that I think kind of I would either like switch or add to kind of represent the drow a little bit better. Casey.
Okay. I love it. I think each drow on any level, including this one that's just the base, should have some spider thing.
Mm,
Like, I think because the drow have connected themselves so heavily with Lolth and with spiders, that they should have web sense or something that's just inherently in
Or
them
a
after.
telekinesis of some
mhm,
kind, right?
Yeah, like
yeah.
something around spiders and spider
Mhm.
abilities. So I think that was maybe a missed opportunity. Perhaps some of them, depending on what variant, could have like spider climb, and then some of them could be have the ability of the web walker, where like they um it like movement on webbing is there's no like limitation, like they aren't restricted when they encounter webbing because their whole city is shrouded in webbing, so the drow should have some ability to just evade and work with it and it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, some sort of
No, I
freedom
agree.
of movement on webbing. Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
Yeah, and the fact that
Totally.
like, or advantage on difficult terrain, right? Like just all that kind
yeah,
of stuff should be added. Yeah.
right.
My only addition was that I wanted them to have prestidigitation. Just to
Total sense.
constantly be clean, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
Yeah,
that's my personal vision of the drow, is that they are constantly like
yeah,
high status cleanliness. So like the cities themselves look dark and
yeah.
scary when you go in them, but the drow that exist and move around are prestigious and clean, right?
Mhm.
absolutely
Yeah,
makes total sense.
right. So that was my only addition.
Okay, so CR of a quarter means that the average drow is a deadly encounter for the average villager, and even the single playable character level 1. Is this good enough, or do you think they should be a little tougher?
You're first, Ellie.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kind of thinking. I mean, if it was like a playable character, level 1 playable character versus like, it's like I'm thinking like drow, because of the way that their society is, they I mean, like, you would probably encounter, like, some of them by themselves, but I also feel like they, like, travel in packs or pairs or things like that. So you're gonna be encountering more than one. And I think at a level 1, that can be a little bit intimidating, especially if you don't know, like, this is your first encounter with a drow and you don't know anything about their about them just at all.
Yeah,
Um, it can seem a little bit squishy to, I mean, like if you start this at, like a level 3 or a level 5, they're a little bit squishy, but
they're an
for a
average
level,
villager at that
yeah,
point. Yeah,
yeah, at that point they're an average kind of NPC, but at level 1, and kind of the way that Wizards of the Coast introduce you to Drow in Out of the Abyss, I think that, yeah, I think that it's scaled appropriately.
I agree. I think you're probably never going to come across just one. So I think that's probably why they were built the way they are, is you can build up and be a little more intimidating depending on what the party
Mhm.
looks like. So I
yeah.
think it's okay.
Yep, I agree. It's balanced. I think that the way the society is developed and built, they are built to be stronger than others, but I don't think it's overpowering. I think that there are, to Ehlwyn's point, they're going to be generic villagers to a certain group of people. But like if you are a level 1 character and you walk into this society, you should be intimidated by them because they are well trained, well organized, and extremely educated. So it should be intimidating at level 1 walking into this, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, I'm going to talk about our last little thing here, which is going to be their mounts or one of their minions that they use. So they tend to use what's called a giant lizard.
Yay.
So giant lizards
Love
in
it.
D&D 5th edition are usually used by lizard folks as minions and mounts, but also by the Drow. They are basically large lizards that can be used as a mount. That is the easiest way to describe them. But they're used for hunting, or in my mind for the Drow, for running around the caverns and tunnels with ease, since they can climb just as fast as they can walk. Stats-wise, they are a whopping CR of 1/4, which is basically the same as the Drow themselves. And it kind of balances out. So they have an AC of 12, 19 hit points, so they're a little bit harder to kill. And again, not only have they a speed of 30, but they also have a climbing speed of 30. They have a strength of +2 and a con of +1, a dex of +1, and a wisdom of 0. The fun part is that they have an intelligence of -4 and a charisma of -3. So dumb as sticks, you know?
Yeah, that tracks.
So their dark vision is also only 30 feet and their passive perception is 10. So this is very interesting that I find that the Drow who is riding this lizard will probably see farther than the lizard does itself. So, but that to me also checks out of them being dumb as sticks.
Yeah.
Right. So you would have to be a skilled rider to utilize this, what I like the giant lizard as a mount. I think it's just a funny visual in my brain. For actions, they have a melee bite, which is a +4 to hit and 1d8 +2 piercing damage, which is stronger than the sword of a Drow. So again, it's very interesting that I would probably travel around with these things just as extra fodder if needed when they go into battle. Like, it just makes sense. Within the book, they do have some variant options as well. That you can also add in the fact that they can hold their breath, I think, for 15 minutes, and it also adds a swim speed of 30. So you can almost make them underdark, underwater type lizards. Or you can add in spider climb, which is, as we've talked before in previous episodes, that this means they can climb around all surfaces with ease. So I just think that that's an interesting thing, because like, I feel like you'd be riding around on this thing and all of a sudden it decides to run up on the ceiling and you're like, oh my God, like trying to hold on as it like goes around the ceiling. So, but I like that you can customize them too with the variants. You can customize them to the type of land that they're operating on. So if it's an underground lake city that they are in, they will probably have giant lizard folk and giant lizards that they utilize for swimming in their swim speed and so on and so forth. So if we're thinking the Hogwarts thing, I feel like if you're going from one side of the lake to the other, you're actually riding on the back of one of these that's swimming across the water. Right. Yeah. So anyways, I thought that's a cute visual. But that's them.
Love that. Alrighty, let's roll some dice for our last question.
Yeah. 10.
And a 12.
Slow and steady, 16.
Atta girl.
Amazing. Alrighty. So what's one interesting or unique way that you would use these minions in a Drow campaign?
Okay, so I would want to introduce these just as you are introducing everything else to a party. If you're keeping with the theme in the book that you have been captured, okay, so you're gonna move through a city on a wagon that's being pulled by one of these. Like, they're also just like, they're used like horses, and so you're being lugged along, but it's only when you get taken out of the wagon you realize that it's this giant lizard that's been pulling the wagon. And I don't know, and like it goes like on the street, and maybe it takes you all the way down through the passageways, and maybe even it turns and it goes sideways because it doesn't give a shit. And so it's the most wild ride of your life in this wagon, and then you get out and it's like, it's a lizard.
Yeah, I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh man. And secondly, this also just made me laugh when Megan was talking about mounting them. Say you were making your grand escape and you wanted to like take one of these to like get away, and you saw how many buckles and things were on the like
Saddle.
saddle, but then you're like, that's weird, whatever. And so you don't realize and you just get on and it's like, go. And then it's just like going and then suddenly it's upside down and you're like hanging there and you're making like 20 deck saves and like
Just to
strength
stay
saves.
on this thing, yeah.
And like AC is so high and the DM is just like laughing ass off.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Yeah, just how epically wrong an escape could go.
Yeah.
See these
Yeah.
mounts and try and get away on them.
Yeah. I would definitely use them in like a similar way. Um, I know, like, I think canonically when they talk about like lizards and things like that, like they are talking kind of about more, I don't know, kind of like your traditional kind of like scaled lizard. Um, but my brain, when we were talking about like pretty much how unintelligent they are, um, could just picture giant geckos,
Yeah.
especially with their like slime. And like I'm just like picturing like it just like no thoughts behind its eyes type creature. Like it is only there as like a pack mule to transport you around, and like it just like sticks out its tongue and like licks its eyeball, as geckos usually do, and it's just like the most adorable thing. And you're like, why is this adorable creature down here? Um, but I have a feeling that a lot of kind of like the lookouts or the outposts and things like that use them to crawl around, and kind of like be up on the ceiling of kind of like the back passageways and things like that, as part of kind of like their lookout patrol and things like that. So,
Ooh.
you know, because Drow have 120-foot dark vision, they're going to be kind of like up a little bit more so that they can see monsters and things like that that are coming, or just other, like, you know, either as kind of scouts or things like that. They're going to be looking for, you know, kind of adventurers that are going through that don't know where they're going in, you know, in the Underdark and things like that. um so they're just going to kind of be, you know, they're going to be strapped down in these saddles, but they're going to be, you know, either on the top of kind of like a more kind of shallow kind of passageway, like not like the 1,000-foot caverns and things like that, but like kind of the smaller passageways, or just at least kind of like riding along the side, so that they can kind of scout out things as well.
Yeah, and maybe even like they talk about having lots of secret passageways and like
Yeah.
secret as in all the drow know about them,
Mhm.
but it's the intruders that may think they're being sneaky and
Yeah.
trying to use these secret passageways. And they always know. And so
Yeah.
these would be there where it's like they're monitoring it, they know it.
The worst part is you would surprise them, and this is the thing. They only have a dark vision of 30 feet.
Yeah.
So as long as you're traveling at a normal, like lower volume, you
Yeah.
will just come across them and you will see them before they see you. So I feel like they almost wouldn't use them as guards on their own. They would
No.
100% just be used as mounts to make it easier for the drow to move around in. But I would definitely put in like there's a festival where they race giant lizards.
Oh yeah.
Like it's like a
Amazing.
horse race.
Absolutely.
Like they have horse race betting, but it's for
It's just for lizards.
yeah, exactly, right. So you as a drow could be a professional giant lizard rider,
Yeah.
and have become in first 6 years in a row at the National Grand Prix. You know what I mean? Like
There's a couple of houses that are just like absolutely prestigious lizard breeders, and their pedigree for these are just
Yeah.
top notch.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Just full of themselves.
Oh my god, just a niche, just like the silks. Oh my
Yeah,
god, blizzard
silks,
Just
breeding.
Bridgerturing it, man.
giant lizard breeding. Like there you go. Yeah, hilarious. All right. Well, any final thoughts on the generic drow and their riders or anything we talked about today?
I think that they definitely add a lot of really good complexities to kind of your first encounter with Drow, um, because because of kind of like their perceived kind of greatness over everybody else. um, it's going to be intimidating to see them. it's
Yep.
going to be intimidating to encounter them. And I think that it just kind of adds just enough for your players to kind of stop and take a gut check.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's also like they've kept it bare bones enough that you can customize it, adapt it. Again, take pieces of what their society means and build upon it. Like it's the same thing that happens a lot with D&D when they build societies like this. But this one in particular, they've kept a lot of stuff open-ended for folks. And I think that helps us make it a little bit more of a constructual, contextualized society as opposed to just their original ask of being blunt, brute forced, angry folk, right?
Yeah.
So I think this really bodes the fact that it's a good jump off point to make it what you want it. It doesn't have to be Wizards of the Coast's way or the highway. So
And basically, if you involve spiders, you can do whatever else you want.
I'm out. That's what it is. Yeah.
Megan's like, never.
Fuck that.
Well, that's all for this discussion on Drow and D&D 5th edition. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, comment, and review to help push our engagement. And don't forget to subscribe to find future inspirations for your campaigns.
If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate on our website, it'samimic.com, as well as a Patreon. This episode and others can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.